Okay, we're recording there. We're recording here, and I think we're good to go.
All right, I'm going to push record on my end. All right, should we try clapping?
Brian, are you recording?
I am recording.
Okay. Here we go, clapping. 1, 2, 3,
4, 5. Perfect.
All right. A life-threatening virus. A group of people torn apart by their own bad behaviors. Authority figures who misinterpret the problem and attack its own citizens while ignoring the problems. We watched Cabin Fever, which means it's time for another Portland at the Movies.
In a world, in time, in a land of eternal beauty, all that stands between a city and a disaster. In a city where anything can happen if you thought you had seen it all.
It's like being on a plane that you know is going to crash. And everyone around you is just screaming, "We're going down, we're going down." And all you want to do is just grab the person next to you and fuck the shit out of them.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Portland at the Movies. That caught me off guard because on my second viewing I had walked out of the room before that line.
That is the best line of the entire movie.
I cannot hide. This is another episode of Portland at the Movies. My name is Todd Workover, and I am joined, as always, by Mark Middleton. How are you, Mark?
I'm so great now.
Good. And Brian, the Unipiper Kid. How are you, Brian?
I'm good, Todd. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Good. I cannot wait to talk this movie about this movie. It refreshed the podcast in my view. As much as I love the Millergy, it was good to get back to a movie that just looked like a movie, and so I cannot wait to talk about it. I went through the whole range of emotions watching it by myself, where I shouted out loud, I put my hands up to my face, my mouth dropped open, and I would wave my hands in the air because I was all excited. So I had a lot of fun with this movie, Cabin Fever, which was from 2016, not the original Cabin Fever, which we'll talk about here in a bit. This one is the Travis Z directed Cabin Fever, who I looked up on IMDb, and he apparently has done a documentary on Darcel. So yeah. I thought that was interesting.
Nice.
So, Brian, I think you are the only one out of the three of us that have seen the original Cabin Fever, and I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. So, do you have any thoughts or insights? Or
do I ever? So, we got to set the stage. This movie is somewhat infamous in the horror community.
Okay.
Because
the original or the remake?
Well, sort of both,
okay.
But particularly the remake for just being absolutely terrible. And I'd never seen it because, okay, I got to tell you, the original Cabin Fever, 2002, directed by Eli Roth, it's like one of my favorite guilty pleasures of all time. Like, I love that movie because it's so stupid and so fun. And it has a pretty significant cult following, the original, that people love it both ironically and non-ironically. And it's kind of a perfect movie for what it was trying to do and for what it ended up being. And this remake happened, I think, 14 years after, the original. So it wasn't that long. And, like, the question on everybody's mind was, like, why? Because it did not necessarily feel outdated by that point. And having now watched this, it completely caught me off guard because I had zero desire to see this because I heard it was bad and I didn't want to tarnish the memory of the original in my eyes. So right off the bat, I did not realize this was a shot-for-shot remake with the same original script.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Todd, if you enjoyed this movie, I can do nothing but recommend the original and suggest that you might enjoy it 10 times more.
Okay. I enjoyed this movie. I think just like I said, first on the level of oh, good, this looks like a real movie. I thought the acting was good. I thought it was shot beautifully. Everything looked wonderful. I didn't think the direction was bad. I had problems because I felt like halfway through the movie, the people who had started making the movie like went to get lunch and never came back, and like another crew came in and was like, oh, we got to finish this movie because like lots of weird things started happening. But I guess then in talking about this movie, it's almost like there's a spoiler like about, so this movie is about a group of kids, 5 kids or teenagers or 20-year-olds or whatever, that go off into a cabin for the weekend to have fun. One by one, they start contracting this virus that eats their skin off. They're getting sick. They don't know what it was, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stuff happens. So we find out halfway through the movie kind of what is causing and spreading this virus. And I kind of felt like, at least in this movie, and I guess it sounds like it was the same in the first one, like I didn't know if that was information that would have been better like to know towards the end, or like it almost seemed like a spoiler, or like
it was,
what I mean?
It was officially announced 18 minutes before the end of the movie.
Right.
And so it was, and most people that contracted it during the movie had already contracted it. So that, like, he started warning people at that point.
That's true. So the audience knew it, but the characters didn't necessarily know it then.
Right.
Okay.
I kind of feel like with this kind of movie, it doesn't matter where the virus came from.
Right.
Like, I don't care if it was in the water. I don't care if it was from space aliens. People's flesh falls off, and that's all I care about.
Right. Yeah, so I guess we could just say up top then that they're all getting this virus by drinking the contaminated water from this reservoir that is feeding the house pipes. So that, when that is kind of revealed or hinted at halfway through the movie, they follow the pipe from the river up to the glass of water that they're drinking. I was really confused because people had already been swimming in the river. Surely someone must have taken a shower. Like, nobody had any water at this. I couldn't understand the parameters of, like, you could, if you drink the water is when you get this virus, because like they're all over that lake.
This movie is no Contagion. This movie, they are mopping up blood, with a handkerchief over their mouth, and you want to get anti-mask on this. That's possible with this. Like, there's no quarantine. Like, let me drag her out and then complain about driving in the same vehicle as her. Like,
let's be clear. Okay. The first person to contract the virus was Karen, and she was not wearing a mask.
That's very true.
That was the other weird thing about this movie, because the kind of the tropes of horror movies are supposedly that, kids go into the woods and they make bad decisions or bad moral decisions, and then they get, picked off for that. But like this movie, like its most terrible character, who I thought was named Mark the whole time, but apparently his name was Bert. Like him and some of the other people in the movie that just behave like garbage. Like, they don't get killed first. Karen kind of gets the worst, and like she didn't do anything wrong. That was very strange to me, because I couldn't follow like the progression of who was supposed to be getting it, or why they were getting it, or why they were being punished by the movie, I guess.
Yeah, I have nothing for you.
So, Todd,
am I looking too hard?
I kind of don't want to have this conversation, but I think it's impossible to discuss this movie. There's 2 ways you can look at this movie. You could look at this movie completely on its own merits, or you could look at it in terms of the original. And it could be, some would argue, a disservice to compare it to the original, but just what it is and what it's trying to do, there's no escaping that it is a shot-for-shot remake of the original. Okay. And all of these questions that you probably have about it getting weird, you have to understand that in the context of the director of the original, Eli Roth.
Right.
Do you know much about Eli Roth?
I know his name, and I know he's like one level above Uwe Boll when I hear people talk about horror movie directors and stuff like that. So that's kind of all I know. Is he's not necessarily known for his quality, but his movies like aren't the worst thing on earth if you're just looking for like a slasher movie or or something like this.
Yeah, so this was his breakout feature film, the original Cabin Fever. And he just straight up is a horror movie fan. And all he has ever wanted to do was just continue making the grossest horror movies as if, the 80s never ended in the late 70s. And so he went on from Cabin Fever to do the Hostel movies.
Oh, right.
Which some people say ushered in the era of torture porn. Yeah. And so I was reading, after watching this and just being blown away that it was like, I did not expect it to be the same movie, but with worse actors and directors, just everything about it. I think the biggest thing that this film lacks, the original had, is that all of the decisions that went into making the original came directly from Eli Roth and were put there with like his passion, and the tone is just all over the place. More so in the original. Like I'm sure you're going to say that you felt the tone was all over the place in this movie, right?
Yeah, it was. It was a little scattered.
So in the original, within the context of the 2016, because it's going by the same script, so they're filming the script, but they're doing it all pretty much in the same style of film. It's kind of got this, mid early 2010 kind of gritty feel to it. The original one, as it would sort of shift tones, like the whole tone of the movie would shift. So when it got wacky, suddenly the entire movie and the direction and everything about it was wacky. It didn't necessarily make sense, but it had charm. Whereas that charm is just 100% absent from this version.
Wow. And I think, the only way I can discuss this is as its own thing right now. And I think probably for the purposes of this podcast, I don't know how many people have seen the original. So, I'm sure I will have a lot of questions that are probably just, it was that way in the original. But so they set it up, that these kids, I'll just call them kids, even though they're not kids. They go to the cabin to have their weekend or whatever. And then we start meeting a sort of a supporting cast of characters kind of throughout the movie. It opens with that cliche of like stopping at the abandoned gas station with the weird hillbilly type people. And then we meet one of the neighbors or another person around the campfire and his dog. And then we meet the sheriff lady. And all of these people are acting so bizarrely that it feels like the movie wants us to think they're behind this thing that they already told us comes from the water. And that's what I couldn't figure out. Basically, we're showing a picture of the sheriff here in our video, and she is basically that lady from Reno 911.
Yeah.
And she has like this inexplicable scar that's on her eye that they do a close-up of, like that's going to reveal something later, but nothing like it. It's so weird. That and the guy around the campfire who's carrying around like 10 pounds of weed in a bag, like he's acting super weird. Like everybody acts like, if the plot was the whole small town was kidnapping people for whatever and they're all in on it. But throughout this movie, it's like they don't even know about the virus at all, it seems like.
So to me, it feels like those characters in this movie, they feel like they're from another movie and they're like shoehorned into this movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in the original, those characters were still a little bit wacky, but they were played for laughs. But when you put them into the direction of this film, where they're not necessarily played for laughs, you're just really confused about these people.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like translating a film like from French into English, and it just like doesn't.
That's what this feels like, is a Google Translate of a movie. I can squint a little.
Going from like French to English, this movie has gone from 2002 to 2016.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of get the gist of what they were trying to do, but it doesn't. A native speaker wouldn't say it that way.
Very good.
So then, it's going to be hard to ask questions because it sounds like I'm not going to get any sufficient answers because of the weird translation train. But I couldn't understand not only the weird aspect of these outsiders, but like that very first scene where the kids pull up to the gas station, and there's the grizzly old farm guy warning them about what's to come, and there's this little kid who's wearing like this paper cutout rabbit mask, and he bites one of the kids in the car, and like there's a whole thing, and this kid it's
Dennis
the kid, Dennis
Don't
the
talk
Menace.
to Dennis.
But he has some sort of mental problems alluded to. And he shows up at the end as well, as if it's supposed to be, again, like a conspiracy from these townspeople to help. It did that. I could not connect in my head what they were trying to do with Dennis the Kid as well as these other people.
I think, and again, this is based on my knowledge of the original, I think where they were trying to go with that. So one of the major, I would say this movie is honestly about 92% the exact same as the original. One of the things that was changed is the ending of the original was much more effective. I'll tell you how the original, I guess I have to. Do you want me to tell you how? Yeah. So in the original, after all of the kids were dead, you see a cutaway to a lemonade stand at the store, and they're selling lemonade made with water from the reservoir.
No.
And then the camera pulls back even further, and you see a truck, and it's a bottled water truck, and it's like Crystal Springs was. It's the water from the reservoir, so it's insinuating like it's going everywhere. It was sort of portrayed in the way that they wanted to get rid of the kids because they wanted to ignore the fact that there was a virus. If word got out, it was going to destroy the livelihood of the bottled water business in their town.
It would destroy the livelihood of the hill people that we were introduced to, overalls and all. Well, so let's, I guess, kind of get into some of the nitty gritty of this movie. So the kids arrive at the cabin, and one of them, Bert, not Mark, Bert, is kind of this Matthew Lillard type character who brought an AK-47 assault rifle. He's walking around in the woods and sees this person that obviously infected somehow. The skin is all coming off and gross. We don't know what's going on. He had accidentally shot this guy, and then Matthew Lillard runs back to the cabin and leaves the guy in the forest to die and doesn't bring it up. Later, the guy who was left to die comes out of the forest. He's in the midst of dying from whatever this virus is. All the skin is coming off, and he knocks on the door of the cabin, and there's 5 of the kids. They come out, and there's a kerfuffle, and they kind of get in an argument, and they end up setting the guy on fire somehow.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Which I thought was a great stunt because he was on fire for a really long time as he walked down that path.
Oh, yeah.
So then it becomes, kind of a movie of, what happened? What did we just do?
And they have no cell service, and the vehicle is now broken down, and so they're isolated on this cabin, trying to get word out. And one of then one of their friends gets sick, and it just de-escalates from there, or.
Yeah, Karen. Yeah, so the guy that they ended up setting on fire had gotten into their car, and one of the symptoms is just vomiting blood and sputum everywhere. So their car is all wrecked and covered in stuff that they can't get into. So they're afraid of that. Then Karen, who, you know, I gotta hand it to Karen. Whoever that actress is, I think did such a good job in this movie about when she was scared and terrified and when she ends up getting infected and is like rotting away. Like, I thought she did really good in a movie that, like, Mark and I were talking, Brian, before you joined the call about, I couldn't remember the names of any of these people. They don't really have all that distinct personalities from each other. But Karen, despite given almost nothing to work with, I thought did a really, really good job with what she was given. But yeah, she contracts it first because they give her water after they set the guy on fire and she's having trouble coping with that. And then she contracts it, which caused me to write something down that I never thought I would write down, which was in a sex scene where her thighs decompose.
Indeed, yeah. So Karen and Jeff each came individually single. They've known each other since 4th grade or whatever. And Jeff has always had a crush on Karen. They finally kiss and things start happening. And then it comes to be known that she is infected and her thighs are decomposing. It's awesome. And then so the other characters, there's Paul and Marcy, and they are dating. And then there's Bert, and Bert is the third wheel of the group who's kind of an outlier. And then you've got the various cast of characters of white folk in the woods.
The other girl's name was what, Marcy?
Yes.
Okay, I just kept calling her not Megan Fox because she looks exactly like Megan Fox.
Yeah. And I only know that because of IMDb. I did not learn her name in the movie at all.
There were two things. Speaking of Marcy and Jeff, or Marcy and who is Marcy's boyfriend?
Paul.
Marcy and Paul have 2 sex scenes in this movie that, like, I felt like when they were editing the movie together, there was a guy walking past with just like reels of porn, and they like bumped into each other, and 2 of those reels of porn just ended up in this movie because, like, they're just out of nowhere. They have music that's completely different, and it's like it's so aggressive and what they're showing, but they only show up for like 10 seconds in that first one, and then they cut down back. They had cut from someone taking a nap to 10 seconds of like just a very active sex back to somebody sleeping, and then like we didn't see nudity again until almost the end of the movie where that quote from the beginning of the show takes place, and the same thing happens again but just longer. It was insane.
So you realize that I feel like everything I'm going to say somehow relates back to the original, but it was much clearer in the original. But so the 2, Paul and I forget the other guy's name, but they made a bet at the campfire that they could only drink beer for the rest of the trip.
I did catch that when Matthew Lillard said that. I caught it. So it's like, at least that's an excuse for them not having water.
Yes, and so that's supposed to explain why I think Paul didn't catch the virus until the very end.
That means like no one's brushing their teeth. No one's like...
You can brush your teeth with beer.
Exactly.
So they end up. So Karen gets the virus. Her thighs are decomposing while they're kind of her and Jeff are starting to kiss on the bed, and so they keep her at first in her bedroom, and then they decide to move her out to one of the sheds on the property because they don't want to catch. They still, they obviously don't know where it's coming from. They don't want to catch it, so they move her out to the shed. There's also kind of a demonic dog that has the virus that's kind of patrolling the property, so that comes into play. At one point,
Pancakes
the dog. If I was in charge of the opening and could get this off of Netflix, there's that kid with a rabbit face screaming pancakes at the end that I thought was quite amusing. Yes. But yes, Pancake. Oh, is that no? Pancakes the dog is a different one because Pancakes die. This is just a different dog.
Yes. Okay. So let me complain about something. the most infamous scene from the original film is the pancake scene, which is when Dennis starts yelling pancakes, and he doesn't do it in this, but in the original he starts yelling pancakes, and then he does like legitimate kung fu for like 30 seconds. It makes no sense, and you're just like, what happened?
So in the original, does Dennis do more, or does he cause things to like get a ball rolling, or is he just because the people? So that's like supposed to be like, oh, this is how this virus is going to be transmitted. That has nothing to do with anything.
No, and he acts in very much the same manner in the original. But this scene with pancakes, it just comes out of nowhere, and it sticks with you. So when this movie opens and you see that dog's name was Pancakes,
yeah,
you're like, if you've seen the original, you think, oh, okay, so they're not going to have the kid yelling Pancakes. This is their like little nod to that. The fact that they put that little Easter egg in there, and then later they still had Dennis yell Pancakes, you're like, well, why did you even bother calling the dog Pancakes? It's just confusing.
So after Karen gets drug into the shed, and she's in there, at one point, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but one of the guys is kind of standing guard at the shed because they know the dog is around. And inside the shed, you see like flashing like lightning or like sparks or something coming from inside the shed.
Because that was the whole end credit reveal. She's a social media influencer, and she was taking selfies.
Oh, you're right. I forgot to watch the end credits on the second view. I thought about that.
But you missed the whole movie.
How did I even love this movie if I didn't know that?
Yeah, so she's total selfie influencer, and this is from 2016, so this is early in the influencer movement. And so she's Instagramming everything.
I did notice at the beginning when she was taking selfies, she went down to the lake, which is, I mean, the location, I don't know if they built this cabin just for this movie, but this location was beautiful. I thought the cabin was amazing. I thought it was great. I talked to Ted Pfeiffer, who we talked to last month. He was he was in charge of location management. He had like 3 other roles in this, and I think he's in it at the very end when they're doing like a helicopter overhead shot of like the cops coming up, because he's listed as an uncredited as a deputy, but there's no other deputies in the movie. So I asked him, I messaged him a couple days ago, but I think he's out of town where those locations are. So check portlandmovies.com/map, and hopefully by then I'll have that. But I thought the location was beautiful, and Karen, when she first gets there and is taking selfies, she's taking selfies with the rocky riverbank behind her instead of the lake behind her, which I thought was a little crazy. It's like the beautiful part she's looking at, but then she's taking a selfie of herself looking at what's beautiful.
I really want to figure out where that cabin is. I'm sure it must be real. And we need to stay there.
Yeah,
my God,
that would be awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's done by Malala somewhere. I don't know what the word is, but I don't know specifically.
And they did use Clackamas County Sheriff's car, but they covered the CL, so it's just Clackamas.
That's funny. I did hear somebody say like the name of the county in the movie, and
but
it sounded like I said something like I played like
no, they said something like Brighton or something I didn't recognize, but the car for sure, it says Clackamas County. They just put a white sticker over the CL, so it's just Clackamas County, which is pretty great. Oh man, the first Portland at the Movies meetup is going to be at that cabin.
Yes.
So after this is kind of like, to me as a viewer, this movie is progressing and I'm into it so far. It makes sense besides the weird side characters. I can track, even as after they set the guy on fire and they're all trying to deal with that trauma, I thought was actually pretty realistic for a horror movie, because usually, remember in Harvest of Fear, how there's literally a small town with a maniac serial killer in it, and they're arguing like, we'll just stay here at this cabin. We already paid for it. or whatever. They're like,
go lose around the Hobbit.
The kids in the movie were like freaking out and showing food and but then everything starts. This is where, like, I thought, oh, this is where the original filmmakers left and the replacement came in. Because everybody started making, like, the opposite kinds of decisions they already had because they immediately after putting Karen in the thing and being like, we can't touch her, we can't even sit by the door and talk to her or whatever, they go in and they, like, handle her. They go, the guy who's a gun nut doesn't want to shoot a rabid dog, even though the dog is already shown to be, like, dangerous and, like, under the control of the virus. And then we get not Megan Fox, who, after they have sex on the kitchen counter in the midst of all this trauma, because what else are you going to do, I guess, she, number one, takes a bath with open sores, which I was very uncomfortable with. But Mark, so let's say you have lots of open sores. What are you going to do when you get in the shower to tend to your open sores?
Probably wash them, but it was kind of a mess. The whole thing was a mess in that whole zone.
She decides to shave her legs with a sharp razor as her skin is already coming off. It reminded me of that scene in, I think it's an Airplane 2 or maybe the first Airplane, where there's all of the turbulence and stuff like that, and the guy is in the airplane bathroom shaving, and he's just like cutting the shit out of his face while the airplane's like all turbulent. Who in a situation where your skin is coming off shave, and she's just shaving like chunks out of her leg.
So I think that was supposed to be a reveal. Like, I don't think she really realized the extent of what was going on, and
Mark's
so
right.
and so it was supposed to be this shocking reveal because she thought she's just shaving her normal legs, where underneath the shaving cream somehow the has eaten away all of a sudden. And now, as I bring my razor up, I reveal that my flesh is falling off.
And I could get behind that. But how do you explain that she shaved off her food?
Yeah.
It fell off.
It fell off.
Did it?
Yeah.
That scene is much more effective in the original. This one, they clearly just had, like, red dye under the shaving cream and she kind of smeared it around. The original, I remember, it's like visceral. It's like you see a close up of the razor blade and pulling the skin off, and it's
I mean, don't get me wrong, it was gross and cool. I just could not rationalize in my head because we see her back. We're shown her back that has open sores and skin infections, and then she decides to shave her legs, which made me laugh so hard. And then after all that, after her boob falls off and she's like half of her skin is missing, she freaks out and gets out of the bath, goes out, though there it is on our screen, goes outside of the house and like collapses in the mud, which I couldn't quite figure out. Like, I get panicking, but I couldn't quite follow the logic trail on what had led her to that decision. Mark, you said you had a music cue that you wanted to play.
It goes on.
That literally could be from an Avengers movie.
the score was really good.
I read that
too.
That was the moment I wrote down. This score is really good. It's very overblown for that section, but the rest of this movie, I thought there was a lot of interesting noises that they would kind of marry to the traditional score like that. Like there would be some sort of like machinery noise or some sort of metallic echo or something like that that was added. I thought was kind of neat. But yeah, I had written down right at that point, I like the music in this, and then Mark played that at the beginning, which is great. One of my very, very favorite, and now I guess it's kind of ruined knowing that it was probably this way in the original. So Karen has been decaying in the shed as everybody else is kind of freaking out and kind of split off from the group. One of the guys in the group goes to quarantine himself in the woods, so he kind of disappears. Matthew Lillard freaks out and ends up driving away on his own when he realizes he's infected, and so like our crowd has dispersed a little bit. Brian's yawning at the sheer boredom of this movie. But Karen is in the shed, and Jeff, the guy that has a crush on her, comes back and checks on her. She's almost dead. Oh, the dog had gotten inside, and that is now eating Karen alive. So Jeff shoots the dog. Karen is saying, please kill me. Please kill me. Jeff says, oh, I can't. Karen says, you got it, bro. And he's like, bro, I can't do it or whatever. And then lifts his gun. The gun is empty. He then looks around this shed to look for different implements to say, like, how can I quickly end this person's life? And he picks up a shovel. And I'm like, oh, that's gross and horrible, but, just really hitting someone in the head with a shovel is a good way to knock him out, blah, blah, blah. Which he does not... He takes the shovel, blade end first, and rams it into her mouth, which was so disturbing and so gross and so wonderful. It does not kill her.
It was really effective, and that's the one thing I will say that was better in this movie was that
really?
scene. You don't see her, because he doesn't kill her. It doesn't go all the way through, and it leaves her jaw like flopping, like Canadian on South Park.
And she's like, please finish it, or whatever. And so then, instead of just continuing to stab her with the sharp end of his thing, he grabs gasoline and pours it over a person who is basically an open wound.
And she's
screaming.
And that's what I wrote again. I'm like, this actress, because like I was sick to my stomach with the way that she was screaming. And then he takes a road flare and just tosses it onto her, and then she just continues to scream. And I was like, of all of the ways that are not fast and the most cruel way to end a human's life, he picked, and that's the person he loved. And oh, I freaked out when I saw that.
Gasoline burns twice.
So in the original movie, is it the same thing? Does that unfold the same way?
Sort of. He just kills her with a shovel, and you just see a close up on him as he's shoving it into her head, and then like blood splatters, and you don't see her. You just see like his face as blood is going everywhere.
Oh wow, yeah. That, I mean, seeing her after he shoved the end of a pointed shovel into her mouth, and then she's just there. It's flopping like a Muppet, and she's saying, kill me.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in another film.
Yeah, and then, I mean, and it's pretty crazy that if it's not in the original, the decision to then pour gas on her and set her on fire, which I thought was kind of an interesting bookend, because that's how they killed the original guy that came out of the woods, was by throwing gas on him and lighting him on fire. So, but boy, I shouted out loud, I believe, on my screen when that happened. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I did not hate this movie as much as I thought I was.
Okay.
Had I not seen the original, I think I would have enjoyed it even more. Like, on its own, I think it's not awful.
It got like a 3.5 from what I saw, which I think is like super low. Like, this isn't a good, like I was trying to describe it to someone, because I watched Child's Play yesterday with some teenagers that had never seen it, and I was like, this is not going to be a good movie, but this is a good movie. This is going to be fun and dumb, so like let's not lean on it too hard. And it's kind of the same with this one. So I was telling them like how much fun I had watching it, but like this isn't a good movie, especially the second half where things just get insane and none of the decisions make sense. But I thoroughly enjoyed watching this movie, not having known anything about. Like I didn't even really know the basic story, having not seen the first one. I just kind of went into it blind.
Yeah.
If the first one had not existed, I would say this definitely deserves higher than 3.5.
Yeah.
But I think that the vast majority of this film's criticism come from comparing it inevitably to the original.
Right. That's so interesting that they, because it's not that old, and if they didn't do much to update or change it, it is really strange.
So that leads the question is like, why was it remade? And no one seems to have a solid answer. But the best theory that I heard was that Eli Roth, being such a big horror fan, and he's gone on to have moderate success as a filmmaker, and I think that he wanted his movies to be seen in the same light that other horror movies that ended up getting remade, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Evil Dead, and he wanted to be able to say that, oh yeah, Cabin Fever was so good that it also deserved a remake.
Do you know if he had any I know he's listed as a producer, and he gets obviously credit for co-writing since it sounds like they used his script. Do you know if he was actively involved with this? I forget if Ted said, because Ted Pfeiffer, who we talked to last month, said that he was on set almost every day during the filming of this movie, which maybe we should have another follow-up episode of Ted.
Totally.
But so I'm wondering if he just sort of signed off on it.
Yeah, I read that he had an uncredited cameo. I didn't necessarily see him, but yeah, I don't know in the active production how much he
It's
had.
just so, just going back, especially, we've been talking about how it's not good, it's not bad, but blah, 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 and on its own, it's enjoyable, but I just cannot get past what the decision process for all of these supporting characters are, especially that deputy sheriff. Like, I get the Hill people, like, you can be a little like, oh, they're super crazy, but that deputy sheriff lady seems so, like, even the way she was styled, she was, like I said, the Reno 911 lady with that platinum blonde, curled hair.
And a really fake-looking hat.
Totally. Yeah, she looked like she was wearing a costume, like it was going to be revealed.
Yeah, she got her costume from Spirit Halloween.
Yep.
So I couldn't get past what that was, those decisions to make that, because that really pulled me out of the movie in a way that I was like, wait, am I supposed to be seeing a bigger picture?
Well, again, in the original, that character was a male deputy, and he was extremely eccentric. The actor really brought a lot to the role, and I read that they decided to change it to a female deputy in this one so as to not even have to compete with the performance given by the actor in the original.
Oh, wow. Well, then it's even crazier that they made such a bold choice because they had her flirting with one of the kids that was kind of a through line, and then it was just so weird.
A sniper at the end, and she took out one of the people,
yeah, she ended up shooting the last guy standing.
Right.
Wow. So do we think any of these townspeople knew what was happening and were hiding it, or are we on the page that they didn't?
I think they were aware that something was going on, and they, much like certain people in the current pandemic, would rather ignore what was going on.
Okay, because I guess the one guy that we see at the beginning who ended up getting set on fire, he is later revealed to be like the uncle or nephew of the cousin of that crazy lady who's skinning the pig that was sick, because the pig was sick too, and I guess she was surprised by that.
Cousin Henry,
who I love the picture of. Like, I love my cousins. I don't know that I have a framed picture of one of them on my wall, especially making a face that's like not really smiling or wanting to be in a photograph.
Here's our reclusive cousin that never comes out. He lives in the woods somewhere.
Basically that film of Bigfoot of just like Cousin Henry blurrily walking by the camera at some point. Oh my gosh.
So did you pick up on any locations really?
I didn't.
No.
I mean, other than it looked like that cabin on the lake, there was another bridge. Oh, no, I did. The gas station they called had a sign that's called Durkee Prairie Store.
Yeah, Dickey
Prairie.
Yeah.
And so I didn't, and I saw that in the credits too, but I haven't looked to see where that is yet.
So that is a real store that is now closed in Molalla.
Okay.
But everything I see online keeps saying that it was filmed in Portland. So I'm wondering, if that cabin is somewhere not far from Portland, or
I mean, that cabin was on that lake, and there's not. I mean, that was a substantial lake. I mean, it wasn't gigantic, but it was big enough that, like, I felt.
Yeah,
I have a feeling
know.
Somewhere out near Molalla too. Maybe they filmed some interior of the house in Portland somewhere, but that doesn't make sense either.
Maybe the crazy pig lady, maybe her house was around Portland.
Maybe, I don't know, but it seems like this is very Molalla, out.
If only we knew the location scout.
If only he wasn't on a peaceful vacation trying to escape a deadly virus. So yeah, we'll hear back from him. I'm sure he'll tell us. But there wasn't a whole lot of other locations. They kind of had a bridge that was in there that they filmed a couple things on, and a couple roads. But it was mostly that cabin, and the property on it. So
I sure hope it's for rent. I truly want to go stay there.
I was looking at like the driveway and kind of how they did the garden areas, and they kind of looked newer, and so I was like, oh, maybe they did just build it just for this. But even if they did, it seems like there was an interior to it that they shot on. So, man, that would be so cool. Because I really liked that house. It was so neat.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of our Eclipse trip.
Yep. Totally. It's funny. It's like, because there's 5 kids in this group. There's the 2 that are, there's the 1 couple, the 2 that are kind of a couple, and the 3rd guy. And I'm like, what kind of wacky situation would have 2 couples and a weird guy by himself? And then I remember, like, literally that was our exact trip to go see the eclipse. Is staying a cabin in the woods with 2 couples and 1 weird guy, me.
And Todd with his AK-47.
Oh, man. So are there other differences from this, Brian, that we kind of haven't talked about this from the original one, or anything new?
I mean, the biggest differences were the change at the end, and then probably the change of the sex of the deputy.
So was it, I mean, like we said kind of at the beginning, this I thought was shot really well. It looked beautiful. Like, did the first one kind of equal that?
In a way. The original, like I said, it was pretty much a written, directed, produced by, it was an Eli Roth. It kind of had that vibe of someone who had a singular vision, and, no one was going to tell them that your ideas don't make sense. They're just going to roll with it. And that certainly gave it some heart and charm that, like I said, was just completely lacking in this movie, and instead replaced with that, like, early 2010s just layer of grit, Everything's got to be gritty now. So, if you want a little bit more campy, a little bit more punchy, you really need, for the full experience, to go back and now see the original.
I wonder if they just did it because they had, like, a bigger budget or something like that, and he just maybe that's why he wanted to remake it.
Yeah, I did see some interview where he said there were some things in this one that he wasn't able to do in the original. I didn't necessarily pick up on those. But I don't see now. All this movie, so like I said, on its own, I would have really enjoyed this movie. But all it made me do watching it was made me think of the original and be like, oh yeah, I remember that scene. And
wow.
And so I got some enjoyment because I was thinking of the movie I really liked while watching this movie.
That's how most of Portland at the movies work. We get enjoyment while thinking of other movies that we've seen in the past that we've enjoyed. Well, that's a shame. I mean, I will say it. I know if there are horror fans listening to this that have Googled Cabin Fever to listen to people review this movie who are now screaming in anger because Mark and I have not seen the original movie and are judging this movie on our own. Don't come at us, bro. But from that view, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was well made. It fell apart in a lot of the script elements, I thought, but as far as the production value and the acting and the music and all of that, I just thought was just really, really fun for what it was.
Did you see the Evil Dead remake?
I can't remember now.
Because that came out in 2013. Oh. And I'm just wondering if like, so I had read that originally before they made this, they were going to make a Cabin Fever 4. Like after the first movie, there were 2 direct-to-video sequels.
Oh wow!
And they were planning to do a 4th one, and instead they made the abrupt decision to scrap the 4th one and do this remake instead. And the style of this remake is very much the style of the Evil Dead remake. But the difference there is that the Evil Dead remake was not a shot-for-shot remake of the original. They changed enough for it to stand on its own. And I'm just wondering if they made that decision in light of the success of the Evil Dead remake.
That could be. I wonder if Eli Roth just wanted to be able to keep the copyright to Cabin Fever, and so he made a new one just to extend the property of it. It is a shame, though, hearing that it is such a close shot-for-shot, basically, remake of the first one, because, like, even if this would have made some of its own choices and stuff like that, like it would have just elevated it so much more, because like I don't feel like this movie was, I don't know, it's I guess just hard to hear that, because I liked so many of the elements that went into making this movie look and feel like it did. It's a shame that
now I'm really curious to see what both of you would think of the original, if you would like it more, knowing that you already have the emotions established by watching this one first.
Well, maybe I'll watch it, because I was going to watch it and I'm like, I can only take so much Cabin Fever in 1 week. So, but maybe later this evening I'll fire up the other Cabin Fever and take a look. But I would say, I mean, I guess I guess it wasn't a spoiler that the water is doing it. But yeah, I would totally recommend this movie, I guess, for people who haven't seen the original one, but it maybe even sounds like for maybe people who have, it doesn't sour you on it, does it?
I wouldn't say, that's what I was worried about. And I don't think it soured me. It just made me think of the other movie.
It's like watching a Cher impersonator when you just want to see Cher.
Exactly.
I don't know why Cher was my first example to go to.
Here we go. So the first movie is like going to an amazing concert and you have these memories and it was just such an amazing experience. And then watching this is like you were able to download a really crappy bootleg recording of that show and then listen to it again. And
or seeing a cover band do the same show.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
And then you're able to get enjoyment mostly because of the connection to the real thing.
Okay, interesting. Well, is there anything else we want to talk about this movie?
I did have one question in watching this, and I don't remember if it happened in the original or not. It's just been a while since I've actually seen it. But I was just really confused. The scene when the hillbilly, the man that got burned, he tries stealing their car, and he gets in the car, and one of the guys starts just beating the car up with a baseball bat. Like, why is he damaging the car?
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that. Yeah.
I think they later sort of the next day, or how is this just take place over 2 days? What is the extent of time?
That's a good question.
I couldn't figure that out.
Just like 2 days.
Okay, which I guess is a little bit of excuse for none of them to have had water up until the second day. But so the next day when they're like, we got to clean out the car, it's full of, blood and shit and everywhere. And so they're arguing about that. The two boys are, and then not Megan Fox comes out as like, are you guys going to clean it or what? And they're like, well, if Jeff wouldn't have gone crazy, hitting it with so I think they just sort of chalked it up to panic and not knowing what to do or trying to scare the guy away but yeah, they destroyed their own car. Their one means of escape from the situation, they destroyed themselves. So yeah, that was.
I think I found the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I just gave you a link. There's a little reservoir just outside of Malala called the Deerdorf Reservoir, and there's a building on that reservoir that the roof line matches the roof line from the photos of the house. So.
Oh wow.
So
I saw you sent a link, but I don't know where Skype puts those links. It just gave me a notification that disappeared forever. What's it called? I'll Google it.
Here, well, it doesn't really have an address. It's.
They don't have Street View there.
No, they don't. No, it's on government property, I think.
Interesting.
And so
I wonder if it's like a forestry building or something like that.
That's what it looks like. And so we'll do a little bit more digging in there, but
well, and Ted, if Ted makes it back from vacation, if he survives, then he'll let us know too. So it'll be on the map. But
yeah, I think this is it because there's some islands in the water.
Yeah.
And it's one of the islands.
Yep.
What's the lake called?
Deerdorf, Deardorff Reservoir.
That was the other thing I found confusing in this movie was when one of the people was the character still had not figured out that the water was causing the problem, and he walks by this lake or this reservoir and sees a sign that just says like whatever reservoir, and then he's like, oh my gosh, it's in the water.
It's in the water.
Like, how in the world was seeing a sign that just said reservoir? Like, how did that trigger what happened? Oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure you're right, Mark. Because it's got that little island kind of across.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it looks like there's construction vehicles in this Google Earth picture, so I wonder if that's them building it for this movie. I don't know.
Imagery is dated 2020 for that.
Yeah. So I think
cool.
It's like a forestry building of some
That would
sort.
make the most sense.
Yeah. We'll go find it.
I was also shocked. So as we mentioned, that guy that got burned to death in the beginning who had the virus, so he runs away on fire, and then we just kind of we assume that because he already had the virus bad and that he was set on fire, we never see from him again. In the last act of the movie, as one of our guys is like stumbling around the property trying to figure things out, he kind of goes to the lake shore, the reservoir shore, and Jason Voorhees, like the burned man, pops up out of the lake, a charred husk of a man, and starts trying to choke Jeff or whoever it was to death and like drag him under the water. Has he just been living in the lake for days? Like, what? How did that happen?
That was a change. That was not in the original.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought none of this movie was realistic, I guess, on that stance, but like that really took me out of it because I'm like, was he just living in this lake after he was set on fire and is now just Jason Voorhees? That's ridiculous.
So it's only an hour drive down to that reservoir. I'm up for a road trip.
Okay.
And I'm probably closer being down here.
You totally
are. Summer road trip. Nice. Well, last thoughts on 2016's Cabin Fever remake?
Go in with low expectations, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. How's that?
Now, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're someone listening that has not seen either of them, is there like an order that you should watch this in? Should you only watch the first one? Should you only watch this one? Because, I mean, presumably people want to see places that are around Portland. That's why they're listening to this podcast specifically. So in the context of this podcast, what would you say?
Maybe watch this one first and then the original, so that you kind of get the progression of better instead of reflection on why did they do this. I don't know.
I would argue I would say watch the original first, because a lot of the things that may be more impactful when you see them the first time in the context of the original movie would be spoiled.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's what people should go on then, as the only person that hasn't seen both. To the horror fans screaming at their radio or at their podcast app right now, what to watch. But yeah,
I did not hate it, and I think it's a lot better than a lot of the movies that we watch on this podcast, and that if the Cabin Fever remake ranks higher than most other movies, that says a lot about the quality of our films.
It is true. If this is what truly reignited my passion for this podcast, I have already. It is too late for me. Despite my frozen screen that we're looking at right now, where my video has stopped. Yeah, I had fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Not having seen the first one, just letting myself be taken away by this. I thought the acting was good, like I said. Everything about the production I thought was good, but it sounds like it's an even better experience if you watch the first one, so I will be going to do that.
Yeah.
Sounds like good advice. Indeed.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. You can find out more at portlandatthemovies.com. You can find all of our old episodes. Be sure to subscribe if you're listening to this, because our Facebook page, like we've mentioned a couple times, was taken down, and we still have not heard back as to why. So I spread the word on your own Facebook pages and share our link when the three of us share it, just to kind of respread the word. Go to funemploymentradio.com and check out their daily podcast. They've been they attended the Portland protest the other night, and they had a good show about their experience there. So check that out if you want to listen to that. Brian, the Unipiper has been down with a mouthful of issues. Are you back up on the proverbial motorcycle?
Not yet. I have an appointment this week to go get the stitches out in my mouth, and at that point I should be back up and piping.
Nice. So are there stitches in your mouth right now?
Oh, yeah.
Are you cosplaying Karen in this movie? Is your dentist going to shove a shovel down your gullet when you visit next?
I sure hope not, but...
All right, well, yeah, go visit unipiper.com and Unipiper on all the social media to keep up with what you're doing and to buy some merch during these long summer days where you need a smile on your face. So go check that out. Mark, where can we go find out more about you?
You and I have a podcast called the Mark and Toddcast, and you can find us at markandtoddcast.com or on our Facebook page until it gets taken down too. Learn about things going on around Portland and sciencey stuff.
Perfect. Again, thank you for listening, Mark. You can take us out with that very, very exciting music we played earlier. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Indeed. Thanks.